Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I came home to silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the kind of quiet that follows an explosion. My wife, Emily, stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, wearing that distant expression I'd started recognizing months ago, the one that told me I was no longer part of her world. She said, "This is my space, my body." Her voice was calm, rehearsed, like she'd been waiting to say it. I looked at her for a long time before answering. Then enjoy it. Alone. That was the night everything ended. Not with shouting. Not with plates breaking or doors slamming. Just silence and the sound of something final in my chest. My name is Michael Gray, 42 years old, construction project manager from Denver. I build houses for a living, but I couldn't hold my own together. Emily and I had been married 11 years. No kids, by choice, or maybe by fear. She used to laugh about how we'd travel the world before settling down. That laughter vanished sometime last year, replaced by yoga retreats, online therapy groups, and endless talk about boundaries and self-empowerment. At first, I supported it. Everyone's got a right to find themselves. But somewhere along the way, she stopped wanting to find us. She'd pull away when I tried to touch her, flinch like I'd broken an unspoken rule. I started second-guessing every move, every word. I stopped trying altogether. And that's when she noticed. That's when she started saying she felt unseen. Funny thing about people, they push you away until you're gone, and then they start wondering why they feel alone. 2 weeks after that night, I packed a duffel bag and left. I didn't announce it, didn't argue, just drove my truck into the cold November night with no plan, only a numb sense of release. When I checked my phone the next morning, there were no messages. Not even a question about where I'd gone. I rented a small apartment on the south side of town. Nothing special, bare walls, cheap furniture, a single window that looked out on a parking lot. It was enough. For the first time in months, I could breathe. 3 days later, she called. The first thing she said wasn't, "Where are you?" It was, "Can we talk?" And I remember thinking, now you want to talk. But I stayed quiet. Because the man I used to be, the one who fixed everything, explained everything, carried the weight for both of us. He didn't live here anymore. When she said, "I think I made a mistake," I almost laughed. She wasn't wrong. When Emily said she'd made a mistake, I didn't respond. I just let the silence stretch until she filled it herself, like she always did. She said she'd been confused, that she'd needed time to reconnect with herself. I listened without interrupting, but inside, something was shifting. I wasn't angry anymore. I was studying her voice, detached, like analyzing a storm from behind glass. After we hung up, I sat in the empty apartment for a long time. The walls still smelled of paint and dust. Outside, someone was scraping frost off a windshield. I poured myself a coffee and opened the small notebook I'd started keeping after I left. On the first page, I'd written one sentence: observe, don't react. It became my rule. The first few weeks apart were strangely quiet. I worked during the day, came home, made dinner for one, and slept without hearing doors slam or footsteps in the hallway. I didn't miss her at first. I missed who she used to be. The woman who'd fall asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, who'd steal my hoodies, who'd text me photos of sunsets for no reason. Somewhere between her self-discovery, podcasts, and her new circle of friends, that woman had disappeared. Then came the first surprise. My old friend Mark texted me a photo. Emily, at a bar downtown, sitting close to a guy in a leather jacket. Not touching, but leaning in. The kind of lean that says more than words. I stared at the photo for a long time. My chest didn't burn, it froze. The man in me who would have stormed down there was gone. I closed the photo, deleted the message, and added a new line to my notebook. She's free. So am I. But freedom's a strange thing. It makes people reveal who they really are. Over the next few days, she started calling again. More often. Late at night. Always with that tone that blends guilt and nostalgia. I didn't answer most of the time. When I finally did, she asked if we could meet. I agreed. Not out of hope, but curiosity. I wanted to see who she'd become without me. We met at a quiet cafe near our old neighborhood. She looked smaller somehow. Nervous. She said she'd been thinking a lot, that she missed the way things used to be. I listened, but I didn't feel what I expected to. No anger. No longing. Just distance. and the faint realization that she was missing something she'd destroyed herself. When she asked if I'd ever forgive her, I said nothing. Because forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't a gift. It's a verdict. When I left the cafe, I didn't look back. Emily sat there staring at her untouched tea, and for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for her sadness. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. The walk back to my truck felt lighter than it should have. The air was sharp, the kind that makes you feel awake in a way sleep never can. That night, I opened the notebook again. I wrote, "Don't rebuild what collapsed on purpose." I underlined it twice. Then I turned off my phone. She called 6 times before midnight. The next morning, I went to work early. I'd been assigned to oversee a restoration project, a large house from the 1920s that needed structure reinforcement before winter. It was quiet work, methodical, the kind I liked. Every nail, every measurement had purpose. No arguments, no guessing what someone meant when they said, "I'm fine." Just tasks, results, proof of progress. That week, I stopped checking my phone entirely. I deleted old photos, messages, even our shared playlists. The silence became something else, a tool. It sharpened me, made me see things clearly. A few days later, Mark showed up at the site with coffee. He asked if I was doing okay. I told him I was fine, which wasn't true, but also wasn't a lie. He mentioned he'd seen Emily again, alone this time, different look in her eyes. Said she'd been asking about me, said she seemed lost. I shrugged. Maybe she was. That night, she showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning. She just stood at my door, holding a bag of my old shirts. Said she found them while cleaning. I took them without a word. She tried to step inside, but I didn't move back. The silence between us said more than either of us ever could. Finally, she whispered that she missed me. I didn't answer. She looked at me like she was waiting for a rescue, like she'd just realized she'd burned her only bridge. I let the moment pass, then closed the door gently. Not out of anger, out of finality. Inside, I sat down on the couch, her words echoing in the room. I miss you. But what she missed wasn't me. It was control. The comfort of knowing I'd always come back. That version of me was gone. In its place stood someone quieter, colder, but free. A week after she came to my door, I started noticing the small things she used to handle that now felt foreign to me. The folded laundry that stayed unfolded. The empty space on the kitchen counter where her mug used to sit. I didn't miss her. I missed the rhythm. The routine of 2 lives orbiting each other, even when they were breaking apart. But that emptiness, it wasn't painful anymore. It was data. Information I could study and understand without emotion clouding the view. I worked longer hours, took extra shifts, avoided the silence of my apartment by filling it with work. The house restoration was almost done. Every day I watched something broken being rebuilt, beam by beam, until it stood stronger than before. It made me think of marriage, of how we keep patching cracks, pretending it's fixed, until the structure finally gives up. Emily texted again a few days later. Short messages. "Can we talk? I just need to explain." I didn't answer. Then she sent a photo, our old dog, Bailey, sitting by the window of the house I'd left behind. She wrote, "He still waits for you." That one almost got me, but I knew what she was doing. She wasn't trying to reconnect. She was trying to reopen a door she'd locked herself. That night, I went for a drive. No destination, just the road. Ended up outside the same neighborhood we'd lived in for years. The house lights were on, curtains drawn. Her car was there, but another one, a dark sedan, was parked across the street. I stayed in my truck, watching. I didn't need to see more. Sometimes not knowing every detail gives you more peace than knowing all of them. I drove back in silence. No music, no distractions. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. I realized something then. People like Emily never mean to hurt you. They just get so focused on finding themselves that they forget who stood beside them during the search. I parked, killed the engine, and sat in the dark. Then I opened my notebook again and wrote, "You don't lose people. You release them when they stop holding your hand." And that's when I decided I was done waiting for her to understand what she'd lost. Because by then, I'd already found something better, peace. Winter came early that year. The kind that makes the city feel smaller, quieter, like the cold itself is watching you. Work slowed down after the restoration project ended, and for the first time in months, I had time to think. Time I didn't want. I'd wake up before sunrise, make coffee, stare at the empty chair across the table. Not because I missed her being there, but because that silence reminded me how completely she was gone. There's something strange about losing someone who's still alive. They exist, breathe, move through the same city, but in a parallel world you're not allowed to enter anymore. One afternoon, Mark called. Said Emily had been asking about me again. Apparently, she'd stopped seeing the guy from the bar. He mentioned she looked different lately. Tired, thinner, like she'd been trying to outrun regret. I told him not to tell me these things, but part of me wanted to know anyway. Maybe curiosity is the last stage before closure. A week later, she emailed. It wasn't long, just a few lines. She said she'd been thinking about the night I left, that she finally understood how far she'd pushed me. She said she'd been lonely, that she missed the way I made her feel safe. Safe. That word hit harder than I wanted it to. Because for years, I thought safety was enough. Turns out, it's not. People get bored of being safe. They start craving danger, excitement, something that shakes them awake. And then they realize what peace really costs. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. A few nights later, there was a knock at my door. I knew who it was before I opened it. Emily stood there, wrapped in a heavy coat, eyes red from crying. She said she'd been driving around for hours, didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside. She came in slowly, looking around like she was entering a museum of her old life. She said she'd been wrong. About everything. About needing space, about wanting freedom. Said she thought losing me would make her stronger, but it just made her empty. I listened. Quietly. She waited for me to say something, anything. But I'd learned that silence was my power now. And for the first time, she couldn't fill it. She stood in the middle of my apartment, clutching her coat like it was armor. I watched her eyes move over everything. The bare walls, the simple furniture, the absence of her. She said it felt strange being there, like walking through a dream she couldn't wake from. I didn't answer. I poured her a glass of water, set it on the table, and waited. She said she'd been trying to move on, that she'd dated, traveled, done everything she thought would fix the emptiness. None of it worked. She said she kept remembering how I used to look at her, like she was the only thing that made sense in a world that didn't. Then she stopped talking and just stood there, trembling slightly, waiting for something from me. I gave her nothing, because sometimes silence says what words can't. After a long pause, she asked if I hated her. I told her no. Hatred requires emotion, and I'd already spent all of mine. What I felt now was distance, like she was a story I'd read too many times to care how it ended. She started crying then, quietly, the way people cry when they finally understand the cost of their choices. She said she wanted to start over, that she'd changed, that she missed the man who used to bring her coffee every morning, who built shelves for her books, who touched her like she was something sacred. That last part hit me harder than I expected, because I remembered those mornings. The softness before words, before resentment. But I also remembered the months when she pulled away from my hand like it burned, when she made me doubt the simple act of reaching for her. I told her she'd taught me something valuable, that love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go without hating yourself for it. She asked if that meant I was letting her go now. I said I already had. She stood there for another minute, eyes glossy and defeated, then nodded and walked to the door. Before leaving, she whispered that she never thought I'd stop trying. I told her that was her mistake. Because when quiet men finally stop, it's never temporary. It's permanent. After she left that night, I sat in silence for a long time. Her scent lingered in the air, familiar, unsettling, like a ghost that refused to leave. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt something colder. Finality. The kind that doesn't hurt, but still leaves a mark. The next morning, I went to the construction site early. I needed the noise, the sound of hammers, saws, engines, to drown out what was left of her voice in my head. I buried myself in work. The new project was a commercial building on the edge of the city. Steel, concrete, clean lines. No sentiment, no memories. It suited me. During lunch, I checked my phone for the first time in 2 days. A message from Emily. Just one line, "I wish you'd fight for me." I didn't reply, because I had fought, years ago. I'd fought through silence, rejection, and the slow unraveling of something I'd once thought unbreakable. The fight wasn't the problem. It was that she'd only noticed after it was over. Over the next few weeks, she kept trying. Calls, Messages. Emails with old photos attached. Each one softer, more desperate than the last. I didn't delete them this time. I kept them as reminders, not of her, but of what happens when love turns into habit and habit into neglect. Then, one evening, I ran into her by accident. A grocery store downtown. She looked smaller again, pale under the bright lights. She smiled when she saw me, like we were old friends. Said she'd been doing better. I could tell she was lying. She asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. Her face changed when I said it, like hope flickered for a moment, then died quietly. As I walked away, I realized something. She didn't miss me. She missed who she was when I still believed in her. The version of herself reflected in my patience, my loyalty, my care. And when I took that mirror away, she couldn't recognize her own reflection anymore. That night, I added a new line to my notebook. Some people don't lose love. They lose the version of themselves they only knew through you. And for the first time, I felt not just free, but untouchable. It's strange how healing looks nothing like people imagine. It's not loud. It's not triumphant. It's quiet, methodical, like rebuilding muscle after a long injury. One small movement at a time. Months passed. The cold began to fade, and spring came with its usual false promises of renewal. I was working steady again, eating better, sleeping through the night. My apartment no longer felt temporary. I'd hung a few photos, bought a plant that somehow survived my neglect. It wasn't much, but it felt earned. Emily stopped reaching out after that encounter at the grocery store. No more messages, no late-night calls. Just silence. I should have felt peace, but peace sometimes feels like emptiness at first. The absence of chaos takes getting used to. Then, one afternoon, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, our old wedding photo. She'd written on the back, "I finally understand what I lost. I hope you're happy." No apology, just confession. I put it away in a drawer and didn't look at it again. Because happiness, I'd learned, wasn't something you find. It's something you protect. Around that time, I met someone new. Her name was Claire, a landscape architect who worked on one of our projects. Calm, grounded, direct. She didn't talk about finding herself. She just lived like she already had. We started with coffee, then long walks after work. Nothing rushed. No grand gestures. Just quiet presence, the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't prove. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was peace. And after everything, peace was enough. Still, Emily lingered like background noise in my mind. Not her voice, but the lesson. The realization that love built on fear of loss isn't love at all. It's dependency. I'd spent years mistaking patience for devotion, silence for strength. Now I knew better. One evening, Claire asked if I'd ever been married. I said yes once. She didn't ask what happened, and I didn't explain. Some stories lose their meaning when you try to make sense of them out loud. That night, I opened my notebook one last time and wrote. She taught me to fear my own touch. I learned to trust it again. Then I closed the notebook and put it away for good. By the time summer arrived, the past felt like something I'd survived, not something I was still living through. Work was steady, life was quiet, and I'd learned to enjoy both. The apartment that once felt like exile had turned into a kind of sanctuary. No echoes of old arguments. No footsteps that stopped short of the door. Just the low hum of a life rebuilt from nothing. Claire became part of that rhythm. She had a calmness that didn't need to prove itself. She never asked about Emily again, and I never offered. We just existed side by side, each carrying our own stories, unspoken but understood. Some evenings, she'd come over with takeout, and we'd sit on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the dark. No expectations, no pressure. Just two people sharing space without trying to fix each other. One night, while she slept beside me, I woke up and looked around the room. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I realized I didn't need to win Emily back, or prove anything to her, or even forgive her. I'd already done the only thing that mattered. I'd forgiven myself for staying too long. A few days later, Mark called. He said he'd run into Emily downtown. Said she looked different, older, but softer. She'd asked about me again, said she hoped I was happy. I told him to tell her I was. Because I was. Not in the way she might have imagined, with someone new or something dramatic. Just in the simple, steady way that comes after surviving something that nearly broke you. That night, I took a drive through our old neighborhood. The house we once shared was dark, for sale again. Fresh paint, new number on the mailbox. No trace of us left. I parked for a moment, then smiled. The house had found new owners. And so had I, in a way. When I got home, Claire was waiting, barefoot, standing by the window with that quiet smile she had. She said she'd made dinner. I nodded and followed her inside. And in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes the loudest redemption isn't revenge. It's peace so deep, it leaves no space for the past to echo. The last time I saw Emily was by accident. It was late fall, almost a year since that night she showed up at my apartment. I was leaving a hardware store, loading tools into the truck, when I heard someone say my name. I turned and there she was. Hair shorter, eyes quieter, wearing a gray coat I'd never seen before. Time had changed her, but not in the way I expected. She didn't look broken. She looked aware. She said she'd been meaning to reach out one last time, but didn't know how. I told her she just did. We stood there in the parking lot, surrounded by the hum of engines and the faint chill of wind. She said she was sorry, not for losing me, but for not realizing sooner what she'd done to both of us. Said she hoped I was happy. I told her I was. She smiled, a real one this time, the kind that comes when a person finally stops pretending. We didn't talk long. No drama, no tears, no second chances. Just closure, the quiet kind that doesn't need explanation. Before she walked away, she said she sometimes still thought about the day I left and how calm I'd been. She said it scared her, how silence can say more than shouting ever could. I told her that silence isn't absence, it's choice. After she drove off, I stood there for a while, watching the sunset reflect off her taillights until she disappeared. It didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like symmetry. When I got home, Claire was already there, cooking dinner, humming softly to herself. The apartment smelled like rosemary and something new, something alive. She asked how my day was. I said it was good, and I meant it. Later that night, I sat by the window, looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Emily was starting over. And so was I, but in different directions, finally parallel instead of tangled. I thought about those words she once said, "This is my space, my body." Back then, it felt like rejection. Now I understood. She wasn't wrong. She just forgot that space only means something when it's shared willingly, not demanded. She made me fear touch. But in losing her, I learned to reach again. Quietly, deliberately, and this time, without apology. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.